Hey, hello. Um, so this may be a bit of a longer video, and it's really designed for today's video is really designed for, or the subject matter is really directed towards uh, addicts and alcoholics and families of addicts and alcoholics. So, and if you read the notes, basically, I'm interested in talking to, or about or with the you know the real alcoholic or addict, and our family of that person, and you know I've been sober for many years, and I work, um, you know personally with lots of people in recovery, and I've watched the world change over the last 40 years around the disease, and there's certainly been a whole lot more acceptance and of addiction, and a lot more conversation about addiction, and a lot more people involved in the recovery process over the last 40 years, and there's treatment centers everywhere, and with varied measures of success. There's no question, but my message is to the person, the man or the woman who's been at you know two or three or four or five or six times to a treatment center, and and isn't getting it. It's like, I don't know why I'm not getting it, and people say that to me all the time. I don't know. I'm hopeless, and they're thinking about going back to another treatment center, and their family's hoping they'll go to another treatment center, and that they'll get it this time, that they'll come back magically fixed, and or their family's given up on them. It's just said, look, you can't come to my house. You can't. Don't call us. No, we don't have any money for you. We can't help you. And so it's kind of got to the end of the road, for a lot of families around their son or their daughter, or their husband, or their some one person in the family that just seems hopeless. What am I going to do with them? There, not that many years ago, there didn't seem to be very many answers for that. There really didn't, and we kind of locked them up, you know, and and uh, and they died in an institution, or they died of the shakes, the having seizures. We used to call them the shakes, and you know, so where do we go? And some of you will know this feeling of hopelessness, despair, of just not being able to make any sense out of it. And I remember, I'll tell you a little short story. I lived in a house over in the Northwest years ago, before I came into the recovery program, and there was a fellow who lived in the basement, and he was in recovery, but he couldn't stay sober. It was, and after, at one time, he got drunk, and he almost burned the house down, and the landlord had to ask him to leave, and he left, and I got to clean up the space, and I'll never forget this. I was, it was pre recovery, or pre my before I sobered up, and I'm down in his home, and he's got hundreds of books that he'd been reading and underlining, and other people had been underlining and writing notes in for him, trying to get through to this guy. And I don't suspect he ever did get it. And the truth is, the sad truth is, that most real alcoholics and addicts never do get it. The prognosis is terrible, and we don't like to talk about it, because it's like, holy shit, what do you mean they don't get it? Well, they die. They they're lost in the mind. The problem's centered in the mind, and they die. And we're often so full of pride and anger, and guilt and shame, that we just can't get out of that Bill called it bitter morass, you know, and So, is there an easy answer? There isn't an easy answer. Therapy for many of us doesn't seem to work. It's helpful, but it doesn't seem to work. We go to treatment centers, and the therapist talks to us, and we do cognitive, and we do different types of therapy. We're looking at ourselves. We we realize that there's a problem, but there doesn't seem to be any way to fix it. And what happens in the spiritual approach is that we're not focusing on the problem. And so for me, even though I never went back out after I came into the 12 step program, I didn't go back out, you know. I wouldn't say that I had, happy, joyous, and free recovery for many, many years. There was a lot of damage done. And this, you know, um, young man had a lot of stuff built up inside, and it took a long time for it to kind of percolate up and boil over and come out. So I spent a lot of time in recovery being still angry and still, fearful and lots of fear. But I didn't drink, and so that was better than where I had been before. Before I came into recovery, I was a great quitter. I would quit drinking all the time, but I couldn't stay quit, and I couldn't explain why I went back out. And so in the 12 step world, which is you know if you can think of another thing that works better, let me know. But what's happened with the 12 steps, and it began with Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's now become like over 200 programs that use this, Overeaters and Gamblers Anonymous and Emotions Anonymous. I mean, it's just, every substance, every state of mind that you can think of has taken this program and used it with their form of addiction, because we can be addicted to ideas and beliefs and all of that stuff. So there we go. So the looking inside, this is what it comes down to. The answer for many of us, if we've tried all those other things, is inside. And how do we do this? I think first of all, we need a guide. We need to find, we call it a sponsor in the program. We need somebody who's going to actually work with us. And somebody that's going to actually work with us. My phone was ringing. And help us through it. And somebody who's been there, somebody who has recovery, somebody who has, you know, um, found that peace inside of them. Somebody who will take the time to, to actually be with you. It takes time. It doesn't have to, but it seems to take time. I was just talking to somebody on the phone, and her husband, I'm often talking to people on the phone about recovery. This is what I do. And her husband, had a huge outburst this morning at the kids, and it scared everybody. And he's less than a year in recovery. And what happens in new recovery, and we don't understand this because we're used to quick fixes. We think things are going to fix, let's get him fixed up. And he's less than a year in recovery, and he's working on his steps, and he's working with a sponsor, but for years, probably since he was 15 or so, he's been, and he's in his 40s, he's been using drugs and alcohol to numb out, to not feel, so now he's a year in recovery, and stuff's coming up, and when it comes up, sometimes it comes out with anger, and so I explained to her that this is not actually a terrible thing. The behavior's not fun, but it's not a terrible thing. And hopefully he'll talk to his sponsor, but it's not pretty. It's mucky. It's messy. The road to recovery. It's real. It's juicy, and we got to be prepared for that. We want everything in clean little packages, and this isn't a clean little package. It's getting free is can be mucky. It really can be, and it's not an overnight matter. but we have to, look at ourselves, and we can't isolate. We have to be with people. And that's the beautiful thing about in the 12-step recovery program. There's meetings. We can go out and be in the meetings, and we can talk to people, and we get involved in service. We start helping other people. You know, back in the day, in the very early days of the 12 step, even actually before they started, there was a story about a fellow who went to see Dr. Jung. Now, some of you will have heard of Jung, Carl Gustav Jung, who was kind of, you know, one of the early, like a father of modern psychology, and an amazing guy. And not only was he, a doctor and believed in the science of psychology, but he also was, had a spiritual. He understood spirituality. He was a very spiritual guy. And this guy who went to him years and years ago had spent 6 months with Dr. Jung trying to recover in his he had a facility in Austria or Switzerland or wherever the hell it was, and he went back to America, rich guy, and back to America, and within a couple of weeks he was drunk again. He couldn't believe it. He thought for sure that he had, learned enough about himself, self-knowledge, that he could figure it out, and that doesn't work for us. That's, what kind of the thing that many of us have to go through, years of trying to, discover the hidden springs, and it doesn't work. We still end up, with that strange mental blank spot. We get drunk, or we go back out, or whatever it is, whether it's gambling or, we're back in our addiction, food. So I went back to see Jung, and he said, "What the hell's going on? How come I can't stay sober?" And Jung told him that he was hopeless. Jung said, "You have the mind of a chronic alcoholic." Now, this is a wealthy guy. He had, social standing. He wasn't a guy living on the street. He was and Jung said, "I've never seen one single case recover where that state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you." And our buddy was, like, holy shit. And he says, "Our friend felt like the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang." And he said to Jung, "Is there an exception?" And this is the key. And this is kind of the foundation that the 12 steps, many of it was built on, was that, Jung, who was pretty, had status in the day and still has status today. I mean, many of us are big fans of the teachings of Jung and the writings of Jung. And Jung said, yes, there is exceptions to cases such as yours, so the chronic alcoholic, have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what we call vital spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. So we're talking deep shit, right? This is not huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding force of the lives of these men and women, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. So we're talking a full-on shift. This is not, this is major surgery. This is not, this is the deal, right? In fact, it has been he said he'd been trying to produce such an emotional rearrangement within this fella. With many individuals, Jung had success. But I've never been successful with the alcoholic of your description. So those are the guys that I like to work with, that I like to, because they're ready to go deep and to really find this inner source, this inner resource, this thing that can't be measured, this thing that can't be described. And and Jung is talking about it there, and he kind of nails it, and it was the beginning. And Bill Wilson, who was kind of AA number one, got the spiritual idea from a fellow who got it from the Oxford groups in the day. In the beginning of the program, he also had the medical thing. Bill understood that we had to explain how seriously screwed the real alcoholic or addict is. And because if we don't believe that, if we don't get that, if we don't really get it at our core, the ego is saying, I can fix this. I can fix this. It's okay. We'll be fine. And that's the delusion. And part of we're deluded. We lie to ourselves and thinking But so that has to be crushed. Has to be absolutely crushed. And then with the addict, the alcoholic, it has to recognize every one of us. I mean, I've worked with hundreds of guys over the years. Realizes that he's powerless over whatever the substance is, whatever drug of choice, whether it's there's so many, but and that's the deal. But the second half of step one is the one I believe that most of us don't get, and we hang on to, saying, no, 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 I can still manage this. And the second half of step one says that our lives are unmanageable. And in if you've ever been to a meeting in the 12 steps, they read the 12 the how it works, and which is the beginning of chapter 5, and at the end of how it works, it says the ABCs. We're alcoholic, could not manage our own lives. So that isn't that we couldn't manage our own lives when we were drinking. We cannot manage our own lives, and that's the deal. We're like, what do you mean I can't manage my life? Well, it's our thinking. Our thinking is screwed, and so how do we change that? Well, Jung said we had to have a complete psychic change, and he said that no human power could have relieved that alcoholism. And I call that, he says no human power, but I mean from the persona, from the ego, from the story, from the learnings, we can't. We can read books till we're blue in the face about psychology, or we can do affirmations. We can, and we can be lifted up somewhat, but generally, if we haven't really found this inner source, this inner strength, and kind of learned what's beautiful about the 12 steps is it gives us a design for living. There's a way that we can watch for anger and fear and dishonesty. The alcoholic is very dishonest, and so in the 12 steps we called it God, but he also has 16 different descriptions of that: Father of light, universal intelligence. It's a and I deal with this a lot with guys, because there's a lot of agnostic, antagonist type of an attitude around that word, and I found myself pretty good at helping folks get by that, because everybody believes in a higher power. I don't care who you are. Everybody believes in a higher power. And the one that I like to talk about that is a higher power that I get that everybody believes in is love. And I often say to guys, if they're bitching and complaining about, because they had some kind of a Sunday school idea of God, some kind of something that they'd thrown away, that was kind of sold to them when they were kids, and they hung on to that as that's it. That's the only idea that's possible. And they said, I don't believe in that shit. And so that's okay. I don't have any trouble with that. I'd say, well, do you believe in love? And everybody says yes. Everybody says, you bet. Of course I believe in love. I love my dog, love my kids, right? And well, would you consider love to be a power greater than you? And boom, we're there. We don't have to deal with the God question or any religious belief question. Is love a power greater than us? And it opens the door. It's yes, of course. Okay, great. That's what we're going to do. And then the question is, what would love do? And we go from there. And it fits in every part of the recovery process. You can exchange the word God for love. And so where was the problem with the alcoholic is in his mind, right? And it says, I want to read this for you a bit, because there's a couple of pieces here. It might take a minute, but on page 60 it says, after the ABCs, it says, being convinced, we're at step 3. And then the first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. So if a guy's been in 2 or 3 treatment centers, or 8 or 10 treatment centers, or he's been trying for a number of years, or he's been banging around. I had a guy here in the house the other day. He's been banging around the 12 steps since 1989, and getting a year here, a year there, you know. Hopefully he's ready to really look at this thing. He's got to come to a point where he says, oh, I cannot manage my own life. I keep screwing things up. I used to say I had the Midas touch. Everything I touched, I turned to shit. So, anyway, that's the deal. Are we done? And be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. And that basis are almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. Most people are like, try to live by self-propulsion. Each person, like the actor, wants to run the whole show. Is forever trying to arrange the ballet, the lights, the scenery, and the rest of the players in their own way. If his arrangements, this is the alcoholic, right? If you're one of us, and if you've got one in your family, this is it. His arrangements would only stay put. If only people would do as he wished, the show would be great. Everybody, including himself, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. In trying to make these arrangements, our actor may sometimes be quite virtuous, may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. That's we'll do all that shit to get our way, right? On the other hand, he may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. But as most humans, is more likely to have varied trait. What usually happens, this is the deal, this is where we're going to get down to the causes and conditions, right? The problem wasn't with the substance. The problem was in our thinking. And what was the problem in our thinking? It's right here. What usually happens, the show doesn't come off very well. He begins to think life doesn't treat him right. Decides to exert himself more. On the next occasion, he becomes still more demanding or gracious, as the case may be. Still, the play doesn't suit him. And many may be somewhat at fault. He is sure that other people are more to blame. He becomes angry, indignant, self-pitying. What is his basic trouble? Is he not really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? Is he not the victim of the delusion he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of the world if he only manages well? Is it not evidence to the rest of the players that these are the things he wants? Do not his actions make each of them wish to retaliate, snatching all they can get out of the show? Is he not, even in his best moments, a producer of confusion rather than harmony? So it says that the alcoholic, the addict, is self-centered, egotistical, and has some descriptions of examples of what that looks like. And then on the next page, it says he's like the alcoholic's lost all and is locked up. Outlaw safecracker, who thinks society's wronged him. So self-centered. Whatever the protestations, most of us are concerned with ourselves, our resentments, our self-pity. So here's the bottom line in the recovery. Why people don't get it, why they don't recover, is they never get this. This is step one. It says selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. That's the alcoholic and the addict. It doesn't matter what you're addicted to. This is the root of it. Selfishness and self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-centered fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation, but we invariably find that sometime in the past we made decisions based on self, which later places us in a position to be hurt. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourself, and the alcoholic's an extreme example of self-will run riot. Boom. So that's the deal. And though he usually doesn't think so. Above everything else, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. And that's what Jung was talking about. But we can't on our own. We must, it says, or it kills us. And God or love makes that possible. And there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without that touching into that source, into that, unmeasurable source that's within us. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we could not live up to them even though we would like to. Neither could we reduce our self-centered as much by wishing or trying our own power. We had to access this source. We had to have, God's help in that way. So this is the how and the why. But first of all, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. Next, we decided that hereafter in the drama of life, God was going to be our director. He is the principal. We are his agents. He is the father. We are his children. Most good ideas is simple, and this was the concept, was the keystone, the new and triumphant arch through which we pass to freedom. So it's pretty simple. And that, you know, if we can let go of any prejudice we have around the idea of God, if we can look at, you know, how if we're screwed, I mean, if we've tried everything, this is the way out. And it's a way out to, you know, beyond anything that we could imagine, you know, a life of freedom. And I'm not talking about a belief in some religion. I'm talking about a actual working relationship with a power that's greater than us, that we access inside of us. And you know, we have to get quiet. We have to, you know, really surrender. We have to find humility and willingness to get that. And it says here that we access that universal intelligence that we are not just a part of, we are one with. And that ego and fear and guilt and shame have kept us blocked off from that. As we surrender those things, that, you know, we become our natural selves. But the metaphor of it being something outside of us is sometimes kept us from accessing it, you know. And that's what it is a metaphor. That it isn't that it's outside of us, it's inside of us. But we go with the metaphor a little further because, you know, in the beginning we almost need it to, you know. And then the next paragraph in this book, in the big book, basically says, when we sincerely took such a position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. So the position is a position of surrender, you know, and we've sincerely said, okay, I give up. I'll do whatever I need to do, whatever you tell me to do, I'll do to get this access to this power greater than myself. And they call him a new employer. So we had a new employer, and that's you know, a concept for, in this book. There's so many beautiful concepts for this higher power, love, God as we understand him or don't understand him. Being all powerful, he provided what we needed. We kept close to him, performed his work well. That line for me in the last several years has been like a key line. That's the deal, you know, being all powerful. So there's, you know, this universal intelligence has access to everything. I mean, I don't have to try to control the world anymore, because I'm in touch with this universal intelligence, and I just need to be able to be patient and be prepared to move when, you know, when I'm called. And every day for me, you know, I use the new employer concept, and I say, okay, put me in, coach. I'm all right. Show me what you'd have me to be. Thy will, not my will, be done. Because the way I was living didn't work. You know, even in recovery, I was miserable for a lot of it because I was still trying to run the show. We had a new employer, being all powerful, he provided what we needed. We kept close to him, performed his work well. And then, established on such a footing, that's in this relationship with this new employer, we became less and less interested in ourselves. These are the promises in step 3. Became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. More and more we became interested in seeing what we can contribute to life. Boom, you know, service. More and more we became interested in seeing what we can contribute to life. We felt new power flow in, right? As we enjoyed peace of mind, imagine, as we discovered we could face life successfully, yes. So we became conscious of the presence, of his presence. The metaphor is, he says his presence, but the presence of love. We became conscious of that, you know. We began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, the hereafter. We were reborn. In a sense, we are. It's like, could you imagine living without fear? You know, living free of fear. And you know, if you're a real alcoholic and a real addict, and you know, fear, it's been there all the time. You know, and that's why we most of us drank and used medicinally, because we numbed the fear, we numbed the anger, you know. And then it goes on after that to the third step. And so that's on page 60, 61, 62, 63. Have a look at that. Get yourself a book and have a look at it. And so recovery isn't for the faint of heart. It really isn't. And if somebody in your family is on this road, you know, they got to go through, you know, it is the bit of the eye of the needle. And so don't enable them. You know, if they end up on the street, they end up on the street. You know, don't enable them. You know, love them, point them in this direction, And but they have to find that power within themselves. We can't be dependent on others, other than, yes, we are in a way, because in the 12-step world we're all interdependent, and the sponsor needs the sponsee, and the sponsee needs the sponsor, and we in a way we are, but it's at a higher level. It's unconditional love, and it's not fear-based, it's love-based, and that's a different kettle of fish. Are you guys? I don't know. I'm just sharing this shit because I look around me, and I see that, a lot of times you go to treatment centers and this is not coming out. We're trying to teach people, some new values, if you will, and it doesn't work, or generally, and so the depth of this information is not coming out, and they're like, I don't know. I went to 6 treatment centers. I'm still using and drinking. They and it's good if we go to treatment center and we get sober long enough so that we can get recovery. It's good. If you're in a treatment center, get a sponsor that takes you through the steps. If you're not going through the steps, this is a simple program for spiritual awakening, and that's what it is. And I'll read some more of this. I'm going to go more into this, and talking about recovery from the disease of alcoholism and addiction, and because I find that we soft pedal it, and even though people in the government are well-meaning, I believe very well-meaning, their hands, they don't know what to do. They're like, okay, we're throwing money at it. They really don't know what to do with the problem, and so at least it appears like they're doing something, but it's hard because it's beyond their scope, just like Jung said. I mean, if Dr. Jung said it's beyond his scope, it's beyond many of others, and except for those who have done it. And those who've done it understand, what it's like to go through that eye of the needle, to find their inner source. Okay, love you guys. Follow me on YouTube, and I'm open. If you want uh, a chat, make a comment, and tell me about your experience. Call me, message me. We can talk, and if you're trying to find this way out and it's been really difficult for you, I do a little study group here on Saturdays, and we can go deep into it. Okay, that's it. Love you so much. Thank you.